Conservation District's board's opinion. As far as having a wading pool, personally, I think I wouldn't mind having it in my community, but the board, looking at it from a company's perspective, an irrigation district's perspective, feels that any water that's contiguous with our own could be deemed a liability if there were to be an incident. Even though there is indemnification that would be granted both ways, that still doesn't stop you from getting drug into a lawsuit. So.
Other questions for Ben?
So let me just clarify. I had a citizen contact me today. So, and I think you've explained this pretty clearly, but just for clarity, okay, so that it gets clear across the YouTube. Question number one was, with a grass park and no water amenity like a kayak pond, could the city still qualify for the federal grant?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I believe so. What kind of recreation? I mean, that's the third component. You know, at the very least, put up some soccer goalposts and call it a soccer field. Then there's a recreational component. You know. Okay,
so the recreational component of this can be, like you say, it could be a soccer field, and we could still qualify for the grant.
Correct.
Okay. And from what you said, Ben, is Pineview excited about the idea of having a recreational pond? Do they want recreation, or is this liability issue something that they're saying, you know what, you guys have to make the final decision, but remember, we really realize that there could be liability over this issue.
Right. The irrigation district's preference would be our water isolated from, our water isolated from everything else by a fence, just like the rest of our irrigation reservoirs. Just that prohibits access and accidental drowning, heaven forbid.
So you wouldn't be looking at kayaks on your particular reservoir?
On our water, absolutely not.
Okay.
So if we were looking...
And so, I mean, the question I just answered, I'm sorry if I didn't understand it correctly. No recreation would happen on our portion just because that's not within an irrigation district scope. But the board's preference on what the city decides for our benefit would be no water that could be associated with ours. That may get a little bit deeper because, you know, we had an inflow of so much and didn't have the expected outflow that would be delivered by variable speed pumps, which are pumps that deliver water on demand. Depends on how many people want the water at the time.
So the irrigation part of this and the detention pond would have to be fenced off. No, that's the irrigation part. Our water would have to be isolated. Yes. Okay. And the detention pond is it for clarity for me, because I think when it was presented last time, I didn't come away from that. I came away from that experience still a little bit confused. Mm-hmm. So there's an irrigation component of this, and then there's a detention pond. They're not the same thing.
No.
They're completely different.
Correct. The detention basin is only for when there's a storm event, and the pipes that handle the storm water, they only have so much capacity. You can't put great big pipes in the ground. You build detention basins that holds that water until that pipe has space available to accept that water.
So basically it's going to be the same thing as what we would see on 2700. The detention is going to be fenced, and the irrigation fence would still be, or the irrigation part of it would be fenced as well. We don't want the detention to be.
Only the irrigation piece would be fenced. We don't have to fence the detention like we do at Wadman. Wadman is a detention park. Same with Orton.
The Griff doesn't.
So I guess it's understanding that definition of the detention. So detention can be open, just like it is at.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So where would we connect? Because my understanding was that we were going to have a recreational component that would actually connect somehow with one of those two. You either connect with the detention or it would connect with the irrigation, right?
Well,
in that one picture that John had up there, there was this idea, at least I understood, that there was an idea that down the center of that water feature, there would be some kind of separation that would keep one side of it deeper and one side of it less deep, for example, for wading.
Right. And the portion that the darker blue, the deeper, which would be our water, our portion of the detention basin.
The irrigation water,
yes,
would be fenced.
Correct.
So,
and you would not no commingling of the wading pond water with your water, correct?
Well, during a storm event, it would have to, because the storm drain infrastructure actually enters in. It would enter into our reservoir. We're actually receiving the water from the North Ogden Canal to our pipe, which will eventually converge with the storm drain system, which delivers it to the reservoir.
So if you go to the picture before this, John, the one that just showed the detention, the irrigation pond, that one there, you still receive stormwater, right?
Yes, and when our irrigation pond is full, then there's an overflow which flows out into the rest of that green area, which I don't think that will be depressed. That will basically be a hole in the ground that will essentially detain water.
So Ben, on this picture here, if we before I make my next comment, I'm going to suggest that since we don't have to make a decision tonight, from what Ben was saying, that we finalize this discussion when we have the other two council members here.
I thought we needed to make a decision.
No, he just said we don't have to because they've already submitted the environmental.
So Matt had been told we needed to make a decision. Apparently the environmental engineer went ahead without us, and we have time again.
That's not Matt's fault, I'd just like to say.
Come on, don't let him
the
off
coordination of this environmental assessment, I haven't been through a whole lot of them, but it's been fairly... The person who's doing it is very good, but she's been given too much work, and the environmental assessment was delayed once. It should have been done already, and hasn't been organized as well as it would have been if the person doing the environmental assessment wasn't overworked, I guess.
So if we were looking at this picture and this design from the Weber Box Elder Conservancy District standpoint, if the piece, my root canal's starting to wear off here. The dark blue water there, the secondary water, if that portion were fenced off immediately around that, the rest of it could be open and grassy. Do you understand what I'm asking here?
Yes.
So just where the borderline is, the edges of the blue reservoir there, if that were the area that were fenced off, the rest of it being open would be fine with the Conservancy District.
Absolutely.
And would meet the
Just one caveat, with that reservoir, we're going to need a pump station, and the pump station will be have a fence around it. Just we can work with Matt to, like, if people want to be able to walk around the irrigation reservoir, I'm sure we can accommodate that, but we would want to have a fence around our pump station as well.
If I remember right, that little rectangular piece in the upper left corner is the pump station, is that right, Matt? And so the fence could go around, be contiguous around the reservoir, around that pump station. Does that make sense? That would meet your needs?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Can I just chime in really quick? I think there's a lot of misunderstanding on how that basin works and how you have commingling of irrigation water and storm water, right? So basically, it's just a giant, I'm gonna draw it here on the board if that's okay. It's just a giant bathtub. On one end, there is an irrigation pond. On the other end, over here, there's a other recreational component, right? Then here along the top, you have like a, that white area is like a sidewalk or an asphalt trail that goes around, right? So you have a trail that goes around the whole entire thing up at the top. The irrigation pond will always hold water. So this water will obviously move up and down as they pump out of it, right? It's like just like their other reservoirs. On this side though, it'll just be grass until there's a storm. When there's a storm, the piping comes in underground right here, and it goes directly into the irrigation side of the pond.
And that's the 48-inch pipe that we've already ran.
Yeah, it's 54.
Okay.
54. As the pond rises, obviously, it's going to spill over into the recreational area, right? And so your water level will rise up and inundate or flood this other portion. So this area here is the stormwater detention, which we ended up, I think, with 22 acre-feet with our design. This area here, which is much deeper, this is kind of an odd scale, but this area down in here is the irrigation storage, which is 14 acre-feet, I believe.
14.7.
Yeah, 14 acre-feet or so, 14 or 15 acre-feet of water. So an acre-foot of water is an acre of ground with 1 foot of water on it. So we use that term. I'm sorry if I didn't explain that. But. So basically, what we used to have was a little pond, a little shallow wading pool here, so that, you know, you could get in the water and play, which is something that came up. The original concept for the whole thing was to have it be a fishing pond. That's what, at the time, what Mayor Taylor wanted to provide for the city. And so at that point, it was a combined irrigation pond, fishing pond. But when we realized how much water fluctuation it would have, it was detrimental to the health of any fish. So because this will pump and drain and fill and drain, it would stress the fish. And after working with the state fisheries manager, we just realized we couldn't really do a design that would work like that and provide what Mayor Taylor was hoping to get. And so it just kind of migrated to, well, let's just build a wall here and we'll hold a little bit of water on the one side for people to play in. It's still a, you know, some type of what we were calling a community pond, and then just irrigate, or yeah, just the irrigation storage on the other. That's how we ended up with this concept.
So it sounded like they. Oh, go ahead, Phil.
No, you first.
I was just going to say, but it sounded like, Matt, that little wall that you drew. It sounded like that's not permissible because it gives people access to the irrigation.
We don't decide what you guys will make a decision on. It's just that I just wanted to let you know what our board's preference was, is all.
So, council, essentially, I think what Ben's trying to say is, if we are going to give people access to the water, we should be willing to accept the full liability for doing that. And so, I think that needs to be worked out. We haven't done the agreements or anything, but that's something that will need to be considered. Is essentially we would be what's called indemnifying the irrigation district because they're not inviting people to that shoreline. It's us. And so how that, and right now we both use the same insurance provider, which is funny. The insurance provider has said that it will cost us a little bit more money, but not much. Like, in fact, I'll bring it to you since we're not going to have to make a firm decision tonight. But it was so shockingly low for this type of a facility. But that's because the critical mass of the whole city, as Evan explained earlier, $81 million just in government assets. We have a lot of risks with all of our facility, but we would need to indemnify the district so that if they were sued or both of us were sued together, that it was clear that the city's insurance carrier was covering it. So any policy we wrote would make sure that they were listed as an additional insured for this facility, so they wouldn't have to carry any more insurance against it than they normally do.
So Ben, in this situation here, the Conservancy District's concern, Matt, can you go back up on where the wall was? Would you just kind of pencil in a fence there on top of that wall so that people did not have access to the reservoir side? Perfect. It's to scale even, look at that. But you would still have concern of the rise and fall of the water in the pond, correct? The changing depth?
Well, we would be the one affecting it because our inflow rate would be different than our outflow. Okay. So it would have to, if you wanted a wading pool, you'd have to have your own equalizing infrastructure, which Matt has that figured out. And so it's not like when we drop, we'll be draining the water out of your wading pool if you choose to do that. The only thing that makes this, originally, I mean, I was very excited about the idea, and but I have to express what my board of trustees has expressed, that they really are adamant that we keep our water isolated from the public. Okay. So.
I have one question for Tiffany. We have is it a $50,000 grant that we were awarded for what purpose, and is that will be affected by what we're talking about this evening?
Yes, Mayor. So we were awarded a $100,000 grant for this three-purpose facility that would be a joint effort between Pineview, Detention Basin for North Ogden City, and a recreational wading pond for kayaks, stand-up paddleboards, that component together. So the three pieces are the reason we were awarded that grant from the state of Utah.
So if we eliminate the wading pond, we give back the $100,000.
That's correct.
Okay.
So I don't know who to address, Ben or Matt, but so my question would be, we obviously need a detention and an irrigation because of eliminating the detention pond on 2700, right? Correct. So if we were going to look at this total venue as a whole, if we didn't add any recreational aspect of this, we still have to put in an irrigation and a detention pond, right?
Just the detention.
The city would only be paying for a detention basin. Obviously, the irrigation district is paying for all of the improvements that they're going to use.
And then that was, from my understanding, John, that was supposed to be, our contribution was based on the sale of $1.6 million from the pond on 2700, right?
So some of the proceeds were coming from that, yes.
So even as we look at this, what was the cost, John? Like $4.4 million for a grass park and like 2.7. 2.7?
So the overall facility, so the three option facility is a $7.7 million facility. It's just the grant and the $500,000 from Pineview offset a lot of that burden.
So we're still looking at 2.1 million if we put in a water feature.
Yeah, so we would be required to do the 2.7.
2.1 if we put in what water feature?
If we do the recreational water aspect of that?
No, the one to the left includes Pineview. If we have the reservoir, even if it's fenced off and there's no recreational access to it.
If it's all grass.
The side to the right is if we do all grass with no Pineview reservoir that's fenced off.
Right.
And
if we did like a Wadman Park there.
If we did Wadman Park, then our cost is 4.5 million. If we do a recreational component, whether it's all grass or a wading pond, And then there's a fenced-off reservoir area that Pineview participates in. Then there's federal monies, Pineview's money. Our cost drops to 2.7, and then we have funds from, we would have funds from the sale of the old detention and some other funds.
Well, and the other thing this includes is funds if we bought the property with cash. And what we've been negotiating with the landowner was for him to give it to us in lieu of impact fees, which means it's no cash out of pocket, about $1.3 million, which means that if you combine that 1.3 with the sale of the other property at 1.6, we've now made $2.9 million on a facility that only costs 2.7. And it is a little bit of a, moving things around, but that's what the Impact Fee Act says. In fact, it says that if someone wants to give us facilities instead of a fee, we have to accept them if they meet our standards. So anyways, I'm just saying that in reality, eventually when that old basin sells, the city will be out, as from what we can predict, zero cash or minimal cash, but we would have to float that until we sold the other property. But what we found is we can't sell the other property until we get the other basin online, because commercial developers,
Gotta go somewhere.
Yeah, the water has to go somewhere.
Well, here's been, I'm just going to express my opinion on this, and I guess that's my right as a city councilman, but I even though I don't like things to just float, like we're just hoping to get this and all the dominoes have to fall into the right place to be able to make things like this work. My concern, quite honestly, is, and maybe I'll be criticized for this, I'm not sure, but I just we talked about, Evans did a great job presenting the information about the assets of the city, but I just think it's maybe financially not the best decision, because we've got assets in parks, for example, right now in the city that need to be taken care of. We're looking at $200,000 for Evan, I think $200,000 to repair Loman View Park. And then we've got 50,000, or I don't know if 50,000 was the right number, but we've got pipes at McGriff Park that aren't functioning, and Barker Park that are not functioning. So to me, it just seems like a mismanagement of money to be creating this next park if our current assets are not functioning successfully now. That's just how I feel. I mean, it just makes kind of common sense.
We're not putting any cash out.
Mayor, I'm just expressing my opinion.
Yeah. But I guess I don't understand your logic. We still have to fix those places that you're talking about, and those funds are available for that and wouldn't be affected by this project at all.
Well, maybe there's an aspect of this that I'm still misunderstanding. I just, to me, I just get nervous when we start talking about grants, and I understand that they save on expenses, but to me, sometimes a grant is like an excuse to spend more money. And maybe I'm misunderstanding that, so maybe I need to be clarified and corrected on that.
Well, we don't spend money before we have the grant, though.
And yet in this situation, we're trying to play kind of like, well, if this domino falls, and this domino falls, and this domino falls.
I mean, we do that every year with our budget.
And yet, how long has it been since we repaired Loman View? Still sitting.
Well, on this project, if we don't get the grant, these guys don't get the grant, we don't do this.
Project doesn't happen.
A project doesn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's all there is to it. Unless we want to spend
4.4 million.
Yeah, and then it would happen, but it wouldn't happen unless we got the grant. And then if we got the grant, and we did the irrigation and the recreation, and we got the grant, then the city's not out any money for this facility. And the other facilities, we'll work that out in our budget meetings coming up.
Well, I would be fine with, I get a little nervous. I don't run my own finances where I'm just hoping each domino falls into place. And I just look at, we're running several years without Loman View being repaired. And now we're going to go back to the citizens and say, we're going to spend this amount of money to build another community park.
But the money we're spending would come from the sale of an existing piece of property.
That has not sold yet.
From a grant, right. But if none of those dominoes are there, the money doesn't get spent.
Yeah.
So it's, I don't see it as a risk.
As a city council, will we be able to allocate the money to be able to repair the other parks?
That all comes up in budget session.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just curious to, what we're looking at. Does that look like it's possible, Evan?
It's one of those, it's one of the goals we have on in our budget, for our budget retreat. I know that.
Good. Well, I would be okay with this. I'm not sure if I'm still a little nervous about the liability aspect of it, but I'm only one vote.
We can bring back the funding sources I think because the majority of the cost that was going into this was going to be coming out of the stormwater fund. So meaning that if all the city's paying for is the creation of the facility, not the land, assuming that the impact fee waiver happens, then the stormwater fund has, we'll bring you back the numbers, but I think the majority of the costs were going to be paid for by the stormwater fund, which would then be reimbursed when the stormwater facility, which is a stormwater asset, was sold. So, but Evan will get the numbers together and show, hey, this is where the money's coming from. I don't believe that we're cannibalizing the funds, which would be the general fund park funds that would pay to fix that. And I know for a fact that the drinking fountain up at McGriff Park, Tiffany's folks are just waiting for it to warm up. I think it might have even already shipped in, but they're getting it fixed here in the next couple months. Or next couple of weeks, I believe. So. Well,
and I appreciate the clarification. It just seemed like, being a new city council, I'm still swimming a little bit, pardon the pun, but still swimming a little bit on how this all works. And it just seems to me that we're just kind of a domino effect. It would be easier for me if we just said, let's get the irrigation pond there. Let's get the 1.6 million, let's get it sold, and then make the decision then. I know how much money I have. I know what I need to do. If we need the detention irrigation pond, let's get it taken care of, and let's get the other part sold, and then we know exactly what we have.
Part of the issue has been that we can't sell the detention basin until there's somewhere for that water to go.
Do we have money allocated to put in the detention irrigation pond, or is that not there?
Which pond?
The one that's being recommended by Pineview?
That's what
John, you're probably going to want to clarify that.
So that's what I'll bring back. I know that in this budget year we had close to $1 million. Well, last budget year we had $1 million slated for this project out of stormwater funds, and this year I think it's closer to $800,000. But we'll bring back those exact numbers to show that it's like the selling of the property. We're using existing stormwater funds to build a new facility so we can sell a stormwater asset to put the money back into the fund. So it is a little bit like you're saying, where we have to build something before we sell it, but I believe there's cash on hand, and we'll have Evan get those numbers together.
And John, could you address the tax revenue potential?
So both of these properties have some tax revenue potential. The place where the new pond is being proposed, or the new detention basin, essentially is just property tax from a residential development. Best example is the average that a 6.5 acre site in the city would create is about $14,000 or $15,000 worth of property tax if it's commercial. That's what most of our commercial district generates, is about $2,000, $2,500 of cash to the city in property tax. The rest of it goes to other taxing entities. Sales tax, we're generating about $30,000 per acre. There's a lot of other complicated things that make up that number, but the idea would be that the 6 acres that we would be selling for commercial development would bring us back between $150,000 to $200,000 a year in sales tax. And so but there again, it can't happen, and it's not going to happen immediately, because even if we sold the basin to a developer tomorrow, it's going to take them 2 years to build the project all the way out. So it's all kind of planning for the future, and I think that's the vision that this project had, was by increasing the the sales taxable value of the property, it would help offset the costs. And then the federal grant came into play, which actually offset the costs even more, And so that's why it's been kind of brought to this point. And, you know, does that answer some of those questions?
That's a lot more clear. It's a lot more clear this time than I think it was last time, at least for me.
Yeah.
And Mr. Councilman, there is no guarantee that we're going to get the final grant, but we've already got the first phase, and we've been told we're in the pipeline as long as we perform as we have been. The idea of the project is sound. There's no reason, as long as the money is there, there's no reason why we wouldn't get it. So that's not a guarantee from me by any means. That's the reassurance that the people at the NRCS have given me, that they've already invested in this project, and as long as we perform, the first thing was the environmental assessment. The second part is just designing the project to meet all of the federal government standards, and providing those three components. I'm not going to say it's a for sure thing, but I am excited about it, because otherwise I'm going to have to find a completely different way to get a reservoir in that area, which is getting harder and harder to do each year, just because of the availability of land in the area.
Thanks, Ben. You did a great job.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Other questions for Ben? Tiffany, you have questions or comments of the council regarding?
Ryan, did you have anything?
No, I'm just listening to everything.
Just. Okay. I'll make a motion to.
No, we need to have public comments.
Make a motion to suspend the.
I'll move that we suspend the rules and allow the public to comment. And while they're, we'll get a second.
I will second it.
It's been moved and seconded to suspend the rules and allow for public comment. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We welcome public comments.
While Julie's coming up, I would just remind all of us that our budget that we do as a city every year is based on the domino effect. We budget based on what we anticipate being our revenues coming in for the year. We don't budget based on the revenues that we received the year before. There's only one organization in the world that does that I know of. And they use a 3-year system. We don't use no government, whether it's our state government, whether it's our city government, the county government. Everything we do is based on an anticipation of revenues to be received, and we budget. Evan does a great job of budgeting us quite conservatively, and really kind of scolds us when we try to stretch those contingencies of what we might receive. Evan, the hackles on the back of his neck go up, and he tells us, no, that's a little bit too aggressive, and he's always done very well, and I think that's why the state this year has the big multi-$100-million surplus that it does, because we budgeted and then revenues came in above that, and that's what we do every year in the budget.
Thanks for that, Phil. I appreciate it. I want to take a moment real fast and thank Evan for clarifying the questions that I had before.
Name and address again.
Oh, sorry. I'm just so used to coming up here. Julie Anderson, 940 East, 2600 North. Thank you for the reminder, Mayor. I appreciate it. Like I said, I wanted to thank Evan for some of the clarifications on my earlier questions. I'm just always looking for transparency, and sometimes if we could just extend the sentence by 3 or 4 words, it would help a lot out. A lot of the questions that I had on this detention basin, water park, field, I don't know. Everything swims in my head. There, but there's been some more clarification tonight, which I'm really appreciated, Ben, for all of his input on stuff. And Blake, I have to say, I have to agree with you. I mean, I understand that we do budget based on what we hope comes in, and I understand that principle, but we seem to be a city that's living on a lot of grants. And the grants a lot of times are associated with our recreational ability. And I often wonder, do we really need to be constantly getting grants to entertain our citizens? If we can't do it ourselves, that was just kind of something that kind of popped into my head. As I sat and thought about this, I understand we need the Pineview detention basin. I hope I'm getting that right.
Irrigation basin.
Irrigation basin, thank you. See, this is where it gets confusing. John has tried to explain this several times and I'm still not getting it. But the irrigation basin, I understand their need for it. Our city is growing and they need to be able to get the secondary water to those new homes that are coming in. So I understand their part in it. Our part in it, if it was up to me, I would just like to see a grassy area. And someone brought the one word up that really caught my attention, that was Lacrosse Fields. And so I'm going to put a plug in for Lacrosse Fields. We have an amazing...
Lacrosse.
What's lacrosse? Oh, let me tell you.
No, don't go
As
there.
a grandparent of a lacrosse kid who I thought, oh, he's just got a bat and a ball and we'd be good. Yeah, no. You have to pat him and everything. But it is a really fast-growing sport here in the state of Utah. We actually have one kid from Weber that has won a scholarship to one of the back east colleges to play there. And he has been an outstanding example to these kids that are coming in. We have a great lacrosse program. And one of the things that they're short on is Lacrosse Fields. And so this would be a wonderful place, an open place to put Lacrosse Fields. So I'm just going to put that plug in. I know you're not going to make a decision tonight, but I think this is a decision that needs to be made by all 5 councilmen when they're here, and everybody can express their opinions, and you can go over things. So I'm not sure whether I want this or not. At the same time, I understand the purpose it would fulfill, especially for Pineview. And so I just wanted to share that. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure was when we sell that piece on 2700, at the time we sell it, we have a current, Phil, you're wearing appraisal. Thank you. You're wearing off on me with your that we have a totally current appraisal, and that we sell it for what it's worth at that time and not what we sold it for a year or so ago. So that would be really, I just want to say thank you again to Matt and to Ben. There was some clarification that was given, but I don't know that we need a wading pond. But I could see for that area over there a really nice green field with some places for lacrosse fields, and you could even put a swing set and walking paths. So I'm going to get my punch in for that. So thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Anderson?
Brenda Ashdown, 193 East Pleasant View Drive. Some questions I hope you can answer for me. Pineview needs an irrigation pond, right? We need a detention pond. The reason we're moving the detention pond from where it is down there is because it will be more beneficial and the city can make more money if where the current detention pond is sells for commercial. Okay, so we need those 2 elements. The biggest question is the recreation part of it, whether it's going to be grass or a wading pond?
That's the question, yes.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brandon Mason. I'm 1114 East, 3300 North. I'm also on the Planning Commission, but I'm not here as a member of the Planning Commission. I'm here as a resident. And the main reason I'm here is I had an off-camera conversation with Councilman Severing, and he told me some of his concerns that he expressed here tonight. And at the time, and the more I thought about it, I think he made them with solid principles in mind. I think he used good principles to come to some of his concerns. At the same time, I think there can be good principles applied to the counter argument, and I came to make those. So not to necessarily disagree with you, Councilman Severing, but to propose a counter argument. So the first one was, and I know Blake personally, and sure like him a whole lot, and as I like and admire all you, but he told me, I want to listen to the people. That's who the councilman I want to be. And I know you guys hear a lot of opposition anytime we try anything like this. There's opposition to all these projects, and I don't think you always hear the support for the projects. And so I came to be a voice in support of the idea of having a pond. So I think that's important that that the yays kind of come out. I didn't want to come out tonight. It's cold, and but I came to support that. I think the people I've talked to, and I can't speak for the entire city, and there's going to be people opposing this, and they're going to have valid reasons for it. I have good reasons to support it. The people I've talked to and the people I interact with primarily are in support of this, and I hope you're aware of that. So I hope when you say that, I want to, and all of you, I know, try to represent the people you represent. And I just want you to know that you represent not just those voices that are here and that always speak up, or the emails that you receive, but you represent everybody in the city, and a lot of us stay silent. So for that purpose. The other purpose I came here for is, and I hate to use this in a manipulative manner, because I want you guys to be councilmen that have your own visions and your own ideals and your own agendas, and to further the city, and that's what you were elected for. But I had a conversation with Mayor Taylor as he was returning home from Afghanistan, and he sent me a message when he was on the airplane about this pond, and I was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm coming home. I didn't want a lot of people to know I'm home for 2 weeks, and I think we know that story now, right? And I kept telling him, "Mayor, forget this. Spend time with your family. You've been away for a year. You got 7 kids," and he wrote up to me and said, "Brandon, this pond is going to be a fantastic place for families in North Ogden." And man, I agree with that vision. So whether you agree with his entire vision or not, I want you to have your own vision. But I know he and I and a couple people like us think this will be a fantastic place for families in North Ogden. And I want you to, when you incorporate this design, please keep that principle in mind, right? That the recreation component isn't just a throw in to throw up a goalpost, to check a box, to get some money, but this is a place that will add value to our community, right? And when we talk about the liabilities and stuff that Pineview Water has, and remember who they are, right? They don't have the same ideals and the same goals and the same agenda as you guys. You guys they're supposed to move water, right? And you guys do a heck of a job. You guys are supposed to build. I mean, you kind of do. I have some some qualms with some of it, but that's what we do, But you guys' job, in my opinion, is to enhance the community, to make this a place where we all live and love, right? He needs to move water, and his board cares about liabilities and not getting sued. I want you guys to care about, and I hope you guys care about, an enhancement to the community, right? So where can kids run around and love this place? Where can teenagers go to stay out of trouble? Those kind of things. Yes, fences are going to help you from getting some lawsuits, right? Are they going to really enhance the community? I don't think so. I'd encourage you to keep as few fences off that property as possible. I lived in a city in Berlin, Germany in the mid-90s, and there was obviously a wall that divided 2 different communities. It was once the same community, and in the West, they had facilities like this. Okay, they lived in a compact area, a lot of high-rise apartments, high-density housing, not to the extent we have down there, much greater actually. So, and to enhance so they had a wall around their city. So to keep them in, they'd build a bunch of stuff like this, ponds and parks and all over the place in West Berlin. In East Berlin, they had the attitude of, well, if it doesn't further our goals, we're not going to build it. So it was very industrial and very ugly. And you could just notice a difference. And I just encourage us to be West Berlin here. Let's get something cool. Let's get something where we can come together and love each other and not be divided by a bunch of fences, and keep those damn fences out of here. And thanks for everything you do. You have my respect no matter what you decide here tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Basin, for your comments.
Hey, Council, how you doing? Todd Mangle, 2139 North, 150 East. You did a good job selling me, but I'm not quite sold. As you guys are aware, I'm not a huge fan of the pond portion. The other considerations that I've looked at with the map and whatnot, if we were to do the pond and everything of that nature, I mean, if you were to say move the pond to where, I'm not saying move the pond to the North Shore, but if you were to image how big the pond is in comparison to North Shore, it basically takes up all of the fenced-in area of North Shore, which is great, fine and dandy, but there's a huge parking lot to support that as well. The parking lot that we have showing here is very small. And a big concern is accessibility for emergency people, especially if it's in a high density area like townhomes, potentially will be there. And I think our emergency responders could agree with that. But also, I don't know. It's just a bit of a draw that I don't mind a pond. I think it would be great, but I would worry also, and this has been brought up before though, how much pull it would be away from current North Shore money. We do fund that pretty well. How much more would it pull away from that potential money maker as well, or less paying money, I guess. Anyway, I'm cool with recreation, and like I said, we would support it if it went in. But those are my major concerns. I think emergencies definitely happen, and other things to consider. I know that we've talked about this before. It sounds like there has to be a fence of some sort that goes around it. But if it is used for, kayaking and things of that nature, referring back to parking, if people bring trailers to get said, equipment out there, now you're taking up 2 spots per one family, or one vehicle, one for 2. But also, how do you get that equipment in? With those fences, if you had those safety features that you've discussed before, Councilman, just keeping those things in mind, and then if there happens to be an emergency, making sure that that's also available for those emergency people if they need to bring a gurney in or whatever they need. So, anyways, those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments and suggestions. I might mention, excuse me, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to mention I was down in Yuma, Arizona a week ago. Wish I'd have stayed there. Anyway, we passed by 3 different areas that had parks with ponds in the recreation area, no fences, whatever the case may be. And it was kind of interesting because that was some of the concerns that's been mentioned in our various meetings up to date. And but it looks like they were having a good time, and also. Far west, they just put in the Smith Family Park with a water feature out west of town here. So those kind of things do exist, but I just mentioned that in passing.
Kevin Burns, 795 East, 1925 North. This was a great explanation tonight of the financing and some of that stuff, and it really did clear some things up. Appreciate Mr. Call doing that, and I really appreciate Councilman Severin's apprehension in looking at the process and how that funding is going to take place. And I get it. Pineview needs an irrigation basin. That's important, and the city needs recreation facilities. That's important as we grow and we need that recreation. My concern is more with the process that this park and this project has gone through to reach where we're at. We've already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars putting pipe in the ground. We've already secured a $100,000 grant dependent on a pond so that we can, a recreation grant from the state. And this to me just seems like a perfect example of ready, fire, aim. And we've really got the cart way out in front of the horse on this thing, and we just need to be smarter as we do this stuff. We're into some debt. We're into some debt with some developers that will cause us some problems in the future possibly. And now we're looking at some more finance dominoes. We've got parks that need to be repaired. We've already put more time into worrying about this park than the grant writers put into writing their proposal. By their account, they spent one afternoon just before the deadline for the grant was due and came up with this proposal. And the environmental specialist that's doing the report, well, she could do a better job, but she didn't do a better job because she has work to do. So this project has missed in its preparation. I don't know that it's a horrible project. I'm just concerned about the process. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I do have some questions here. Do we want to entertain those at this time, or do we want to?
Whatever you want to do. I do just want to mention one thing, Council. One of the reasons that the folks who applied for the grant were able to apply for it in an afternoon was the discussion had already started about moving the detention facility, and we had some preliminary drawings already done by our engineer. And so when the grant application was brought, or the grant was brought to our attention, I believe it was the state NCRS folks were reaching out because they didn't have enough projects being submitted, and ours, because of how far along it was in the discussion phase, we said, oh well, let's throw ours in the mix, and so that's why we actually were able to do it in an afternoon, is we already had enough drawings and information to make our application.
I think it's equally important to remember too that the part of the reason that this got started was because we had a buyer for that property. They were under contract and they then have since backed out. So it wasn't a matter of, hey, let's just move it because someday it might happen, as has been accused. We actually had a buyer for the property. We had an agreed upon price. And then they found a better deal in Oregon and they decided to back out of this one and move on. So it's not as nefarious as it might be made out to be. There was good planning. There's been a lot of process, as John mentioned. The reason that the grant could be written in an afternoon was because of the time that we spent working on these things ahead of time and not just waiting to the last moment and waiting, okay, let's get a grant and now let's start the work. We actually did some work, and that's what we do as a city council. I don't get paid more for doing more work. I don't get paid less for doing less work. I'm here to do a certain amount of work, and if it means I sit in the meeting till midnight so that somebody can write a grant in an afternoon, then so be it. That's what we're going to do. That's what we're here to do. That's what an elected official is here to do. And all of the hours and all of the time that we've spent on this project, in my estimation, have been well used and put into place and have put us in the position that we can make some good, solid decisions as we move forward. And it's why decisions haven't been made up to this point, because we weren't in a good spot to make that decision. I mean, it can be painted, you can spin it any way you want to. The reality is there's been a lot of planning, there's been a lot of process. If there hadn't been somebody putting a number on the line and willing to write us a contract for that piece of property, we wouldn't have gone this direction. And that's the long and the truth of it.
Janice Christensen, 1233 East, 2250 North Ogden. I'm very happy to be here tonight. I'm very happy for the information. I'm very happy for the input. My comment would just be that as a public, we're not here in accusatory form or condition, and we don't want to bring on, all we want is transparency. So sometimes when questions come or when it looks accusatory, it's only desiring transparency, and the public in North Ogden has experienced a bit of mistrust. And so we're just begging you as individuals to not personalize, but to just continue to try to be transparent for us and explain and educate, and then we'll go forward together. It was like my comment from my mayoral thing: if you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, go together. And so we're asking to go together. We're not accusing someone of bad stuff. We just want information. We just want transparency. And so I so appreciate the questions that have brought that forth tonight and helped us to understand a little better. Really, really appreciate your comments, Councilman Severin, and some of the public comments. I really, we want as a city to have the information and to feel good about the decisions made. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Christensen. I had some questions that was sent to me by one of our citizens. I'll just go over them real quick. I think we've answered most of them. It says, with a grass park and no water amenity like a kayak pond, could the city still qualify for a federal grant? I think we clarified that this evening that we can have grass and we can have water and still qualify for the federal grant. What does the grant cover? Chime in if you... What does the grant cover? Pineview is the applicant, North Ogden is the co-applicant. So what does it cover for North Ogden's portion? So we're co-applicants for this particular grant. Any other clarification regarding that?
Yes, Mayor. As far as the irrigation portion goes, we would receive 75% funding, and we would have to contribute 25%. As far as the detention basin goes, it's 100% funded. You guys are basically you're building the infrastructure with federal monies, and then the recreational component is 50-50.
Okay, thank you. If the city elects to create a recreational pond, wading, kayaking, etc., what quality of water will be in the pond? Is it going to be contaminated from the dog park, another collected basin, making the water unhealthy? What temperature will the water be? So several questions in that regard. And if we were to create a recreational pond, we would not, we'd probably have to move the dog park someplace else so it did not feed contaminated water into the collecting basins and make the water unhealthy. As far as contaminated water, it wouldn't be any more contaminated than recreating at Pineview or recreating at Willard Basin or any of those other places. It'd be a similar situation. What temperature will the water be? Depends on whether you're doing the polar plunge or whether you're in midsummer. That would vary. It says a small state grant was lost on August 12th. Will other grants have to be found because of park impact fees have been designated for ongoing amphitheater project? I don't think that grant has been lost. Is that misnomer there?
So the impact fees, the council hasn't spent any of next year's parks impact fees, and this project, I think at the very earliest would be fall of 2020. Does that sound about right, Ben and Matt? So it would be probably not even in the next budget year, but the following budget year when construction would actually start.
Okay.
So that's when other, if park impact fees were being spent, it would be that budget year. Okay.
I think that answers most of the citizens' questions, and we'll then proceed. I would assume from the discussion of the council that there's other information you need to receive that John talked about that he would get before we move for a definite decision tonight. Is that correct?
Well, and I think we all were in agreement that all five of us should be here to discuss to make the final decision.
Okay.
And the reason we couldn't is because we thought we were under the gun to get this done, but it sounds to me like we have a little bit of time, so I would think we'd be able to bring it back sometime in, February. Was February a bad one, or was it?
We were going to ask the council about the possibility of doing an extra meeting in February, given that we lost one this month and can't do a work session because the mayor and the recorders will all be out of town. So we wondered about doing one on the 12th, the 19th, and the 26th of February.
Brian, did you hear that?
Yep, I'm available on all those dates.
As am I.
Okay.
So is that's the position of the council this evening, that we postpone it and wait for the full council?
And it sounds to me like John's going to get us more financial information for the next meeting, or Evan, I'm sorry, Evan will get it. And then the three plans are proposed, at least, I know these plans are not set in stone yet. It's just the idea of all grass, water and grass, or water and wading pond, or whatever.
Okay.
I would like to know, The next one is the grant that Tiffany had indicated. Sounds to me like that grant would not be available if we did not do the wading pond thing, and that's
it needs
for sure.
Yeah, it needs a water recreation component in order to comply.
All right.
If we put a sprinkler out there that runs,
Run through the sprinkler.
It actually has to be a council member with a hose.
how big a hose can you supply, Ryan?
We can get a good one there.
Okay,
Mayor, I'd move that we table item number 9 then to a date in February where we can have all 5 council members here.
okay, it's been moved that we postpone that till the mid-February.
I'll second that.
It's been second. Is this a roll call vote or?
You could just do it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Number 10 on the agenda is discussion.
Matt has something he was going to.
Can I just clarify a couple of quick little things?
Sure.
I know the public hearing's over, but I just wanted to point out a couple of quick things for the council members, if I may.
Sure.
Okay, I don't want to be out of line. Can you bring up the drawing with the lacrosse field?
Yes.
If it's possible. They're big they're big files. One of the things I want to make sure you understand is that in order to put a big, like a soccer, like a regular size soccer or lacrosse field or whatever, field that you want, there isn't room on the site to do irrigation and a field, if that makes sense. So when we do the irrigation pond, you only have about half the room that you would need for a lacrosse venue. It would just be, half a field essentially is all you could really get on there. And then that's why I was asking. You can see the outline of the lacrosse field on that park, and it fills up the whole thing pretty much. There's no room on there for This is the field here. This is the size of a field, and there's a little bit of room here on the outside, but the irrigation pond, and I'm sorry, the audience can't really see but the irrigation pond is this portion, right? So it would take up half of the field. So you couldn't quite fit it on there. So, and then the other quick thing I wanted to point out is with the storm drain, we're actually adding capacity it's bigger than the pond across the street, the one that we're gonna eventually get rid of if this all goes through. And so we're actually adding some capacity, some growth, which we expect to happen. And so this pond actually replaces a future pond that we might have elsewhere, right? And so we put it here, is what I'm saying, which helps. And then the other cool part about this, and this is something that I remembered while I was talking with Ben, is that we coordinate the water levels together. Okay, and this is regardless of whether you have a wading pool or not. Okay, so whatever, if we have the irrigation component and a grass component over here, this works. It also works with the wading pool. But if we're anticipating a storm, then Pineview can defer their turnout on the canal, and so they would actually lower the water level in their irrigation pond significantly in anticipation of a storm event. So they could drop easily, I'm guessing, let's just say half. So they could add, or if they only had half an irrigation pond, when we have a storm, we gain that amount. Does that make sense? So we add 7 acre-feet of irrigation, or of stormwater storage in the irrigation pond. Sorry, Ryan, you can't see that, but I can explain that later if you need. Anyway, so it was just kind of a cooperative thing we thought was an unexpected benefit of combining the two systems together. So we can actually increase this to significantly more and help with our stormwater control. And yeah, that was it. So sorry,
Thanks, Matt.
I was out of turn.
That was good clarification. Thank you very much. Next item is discussion or printing of Cherry Days magazine. Presenter will be John Call.
So, Council, the last 2 years, we have put the Cherry Days magazine as an insert in our monthly newsletter. And the question has been brought up, do we want to extend, or do we want to go back to where we used to have a separate publication? I believe the typical cost for the insert has been $5,000 to $6,000, and that's just for that insert. That's not the other publication of the magazine. But I believe the historical cost to do our own was $8,000 to $9,000, close to 10, for which we would get sponsors, and the sponsors would provide some money. There were years that we didn't cover the full cost of the separate magazine, and so. Anyways, the question is, which direction does the council want to move? In the past, our Cherry Days separate magazine has been a color cover with a black and white inside. But it was, if people took it to the Cherry Days, they could just carry that instead of carrying the whole North Ogden connection portion. Anyways, we just kind of want to get a feel for what the council wants to do moving forward. And then also, if we do want to stake with an insert, we probably need to add it as a written provision in the contract we have with the publisher of the magazine to just clarify how the expenses are done. That part of a big portion of the cost of magazines, and you times that by, I think magazines go out at 50 cents or more. I know that the rate just went up or it's going up on stuff. So, you're talking a good chunk, a third or more of that is postage fees that we save by doing it as an insert with the magazine, because the magazine isn't heavy enough that it's in the next bracket for shipping costs, or at least it's exponentially smaller than what it would cost to send a separate unit. So it's just, what does the council think? Tiffany, she's here to answer any questions. She actually made sure we did the pond discussion on the night we discussed the magazine. Oh, I'm kidding. Anyways, so if you have questions for her, my impression is that it has been a little bit easier design-wise to do the insert, but it has been harder to get advertisers because they don't want to be in the same magazine twice. So we have lost some revenue from sponsors that way.
Tiffany, can you give us your insight on this?
So a couple years back, like John said, we looked at Cherry Days and we looked at some of the expenses that we have for Cherry Days, and the magazine was one of the very large expenses that we had for Cherry Days, and we weren't covering our costs at that point with the sponsors that we had and where money goes. And quickly, how sponsorship works for Cherry Days is we get sponsors that sponsor Cherry Days. They may have their name on an event, but it doesn't necessarily cover the cost of the event that they've got their name tied to. So if there is a sponsor for the evening concert and fireworks, their sponsorship was enough to get their name associated with that, but it may not cover the full cost of the evening concert and the fireworks. The fireworks is a perfect example of that. So we do have sponsors who end up getting advertising space in the publication, either version of it. And we looked at that and said, we're not covering our costs. Is there a way we can do something to still get a publication to the residents, but cut the costs so that we can help cover our basis for what we have inside? Because the advertisers inside were not covering the costs of sending out a separate publication. And we said, well, the city is going to be sending out its own magazine or a different version of the newsletter. And so we could piggyback on those mailing costs. Like John said, that was a big part of the expense. We could put it in as an insert. It's really meant to be a pull-out magazine inside of a magazine. And by doing that, we were able to cut costs significantly. It has been mentioned that people were less likely to want to be in it because it was in another magazine that they may or may not have been advertising in. And we've also had fewer people just want to be inside it overall. I think part of some things to note, there are a lot of similar type publications that go out at the same time every month. The newsletter, being in magazine format, competes with several others, a couple of which came out at the same time that the city's newsletter came out in magazine form. So some of the residents may get 2 or 3 magazine type full color publications in the mail in the same week. And we got a lot of comments that all of those get tossed because they don't feel like they're worth going through. So that is something to consider when you look at, do you want to go back to a black and white, color cover only publication? A lot of people recognize that as your Cherry Days publication, knew to look for it, and actually throughout our first year of other material because they were looking for black and white material. However, we were hoping that by transitioning and piggybacking on the mailing, we'd be able to save on costs. And we thought that it was an improvement to be able to offer color to the advertisers instead of just black and white publications. So that was the reason for moving towards the insert or the magazine inside the magazine, was to help cover the costs of the publication. We have lost a few sponsors, not directly tied to our having the magazine inside the city's publication, but we have lost advertisers inside for those reasons that I mentioned. So that's the reason that we've chosen to go that route, but we felt like after 2 years we should bring that back to you, as, believe it or not, we're already planning this year's Cherry Days.
Thank you, Tiffany. Comments from the council?
We've not had complaints one way or another. Did people like the other? I like the other magazine too.
I think people like to read it, yes, and they like to have it. It was more of a novelty magazine, I guess you'd say, but we didn't see that it justified $3,000 or $4,000 worth of cost that we weren't able to cover.
So nobody complained about it being in the Speltz magazine, the North Ogden City Connection?
There were people that didn't like that because they already utilized his magazine as a way of getting their information across. So they felt like they were doubling up.
Advertisers.
But the North Ogden Connection is cheaper and less expensive.
Yes.
To advertise it?
Yeah, I mean, as far as like being able to create it and send it out with the Cherry Days information.
Yes.
Yeah, it's about half.
Well, my vote would be to be as economic as we can, but that's my vote. If we're still creating if it's productive and it looks nice.
Could we check with the North Ogden Connection publisher to see if we can get a glued in insert, that kind of gummy sticky glue that you get the perfume ads and every magazine you get have these things stuck to half the pages. Could we check on, see if we can have it done that way instead of it stapled in so that it can be removed?
We can. Off the top of my head, I'm going to say it's not something they're able to do because I talked to Ryan specifically about being able to pull it out.
Oh, okay.
And he still did mention the staples. We do have a fold on the front cover, and that's, sorry, I need a drink. That's meant to be to fold it out so that it's noticeable. So you can quickly get to the Cherry Days portion, but you have to fold that out initially.
I said my piece.
I use it either way. I mean, I like not spending the extra money.
You don't need to.
You don't need to.
Okay.
I'd keep it in the magazine.
You still there, Ryan?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't hear the last little bit. I had one quick question. We say the advertisers don't want to pay twice to advertise in the City Connection. Will they want to pay twice to do 2 separate publications?
Historically, yes.
Tiffany says historically, yes.
Okay.
Doesn't say decision, just discussion. So, where do you want to go? Mayor,
You're asking me.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what do we need to go do from here?
If the council's leaning towards leaving it as an insert, then we should bring it back as an addition to the contract for the North Ogden Connection. If the council was leaning towards not doing it as an insert, then we would make sure staff knew, and we would start prepping our magazine as a separate magazine.
I'd leave it as insert. That's me.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yep, sounds good.
It looks like the direction. Thank you. Now we'll open again for public comments.
Hi, I'm Spencer Alexander, 1740 North, 150 East. So you guys obviously represent the people tonight. I'm going to represent Tucker. This is a fish that lives in what's been referred to as a ditch, but this is actually Coldwater Creek / 4 Mile Creek. That's how it's listed on all the documents for Prominence Point. Anyway, I'll pass this around so you guys can take a look if that's okay. So I've caught him about 20 times now. That is a life-size version. Now, this waterway is actually very productive for fish. Since I've moved there, the first year we just had a few big ones. And this last year I'll go out at night with my spotlight because that's the easiest time to spot them. And we've got juveniles, we've got mid-size. So there's a chance that we actually have a really healthy ecosystem. So the idea that I'm going to pitch here, as a lot of times we have talk about, well, we need a community fish pond. Well, we already have a waterway. There's groups out there, such as Trout Unlimited and a few others, that we could do some things to make it a better ecosystem. Not only a better ecosystem, but it would also be a more creek-like, which would also make it more aesthetically pleasing for the mass population that's now going to move in Prominence Point. And there's already a trail that's going to pass that waterway. So the aesthetic versus actually making it a recreational component. And there's a number of ways we could go about this, but I just want to float it out there. And I would love to be part of it. If I could donate some art to raise funds for it, whatever, I'd be happy to. Because I think I was on my Facebook, I saw somebody posted a picture of a creek. And it said, the original PlayStation. And, you know, that made me think about how when I was a kid, we spent a lot more time in the outdoors. We did things like that. Now, I guess some of my concerns about the waterway is it's been, since I've been in the city and I've discussed it with members of the council, it's gone from a natural drainage, like when I brought up the issue about possible flooding. They said, well, if it's floods, it's natural drainage. Can't do anything about it. But now it's a ditch, it's a canal. I've also gone over some of the other minutes in different council meetings where there's been talk of pulling back from having ownership of canals because of the liability for flooding or such things. So I guess that's my confusion is we're going to keep it a natural waterway. If we do that, then we can get Trout Unlimited in there. If we don't, if it's a canal, then it's just a canal. And we can't do the beautification and those other elements. So anyway, that's just something I wanted to throw out there. You can contact me, but I think it would be a great idea. I think we could do it if we get donations from certain things like, say, like rocks, right? The whole hillside up there is made of rocks. You have people moving in. Sometimes they have to actually move away those rocks. One of the things I was going to say is, so the substrate there, the bottom of that creek, unfortunately, is very silty because when we get our water comes down that canyon, it gets really silty. So it's kind of difficult to actually wade through it. I got in there once because there's a plant growing in there. And this plant and sometimes in the summer months, it'll cover almost the whole waterway. Well, when that water comes and it rises and it hits that silt, it actually rolls it up in these big wads. And they could very easily clog like some of the pipes underneath the streets. There was actually one, it was winter actually, I got in there in my waders and I pulled this stuff up. So once it rolls up, it's heavy. And so if we change the substrate, maybe from sand to, say, rock, we might be able to prevent that plant from growing as much. And so that might be preventing a, liability issue as well. Anyway, those are just my thoughts. Those thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Seeing no other comments, we'll move to item 12, council, mayor, and staff comments. Councilman Turner.
Have we, or when are we going to start discussing budget meeting, dates and stuff. I just, I'm on a new job site, and the job site I'm on, I don't have a cell phone or internet during the day, so I make sure if you call, you leave me a message, but I need to start kind of planning for that work-wise, so we just need to start looking at dates. Usually we start in March, don't we?
Just tentatively, we're starting in March, Evan?
We usually kick off in February, and then just kind of an introduction in February, and then more formal meetings. And
Are we going to try to do it like we've done it just in council meetings, or coming early and stuff? I mean, that'll be another challenge. I just need to make some arrangements. So
we'll put together a calendar and send it out and ask for your comments.
Okay.
That'd be all right.
Yeah, like I said, I don't have email or cell phone during the day, so just be aware. So
Okay.
that's it.
Councilman Severie?
Kudos, Dave. The plowmen have done a wonderful job. A wonderful job.
You get my text? Yeah, except for my mailbox.
Oh, 1050 was the worst street in the community. Just kidding. Councilman Barker?
Nope, I don't have anything tonight.
Okay. Councilman Swanson?
Just a couple of things. Ms. Christensen, thank you for your comments. Really appreciate it. However, I would disagree that comments like ready, fire, aim in describing a process that the council and the city used in a project is not an attempt to gain transparency. It's an accusatory statement.
I don't know what you're referring to.
Mr. Burns' comment that the pond project was a ready, fire, aim, and that we'd spent too much time on it. That why did we spend so much time on it when the grant could be written in an afternoon? That's anything but seeking transparency. That's accusatory. And the only other comment I would make, and I'm sure your husband understands this probably better than anybody in the city, is that my not understanding what he and his colleagues in the Senate are doing doesn't mean that they aren't transparent and that they haven't done the best that they can to get the information out. Sometimes it simply means I don't understand what they're doing. And I would ask that citizens keep that in mind at times when they're talking about your local city council, that we have lots of discussion, we have lots of open discussion. There is no hidden discussion that goes on. We aren't like the Senate or the House where we have our Republican caucus meeting that is a closed door that essentially decides the votes that happen on the floors. We don't have that here. So we are open. Does it mean we can't do better? Absolutely not. It means we can. And I appreciate any opportunity to do better. But when we're accused of something, you got to know that I'm going to respond to it.
I understand totally.
This isn't a back and forth right now. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I'll catch you next time.
No, we can visit afterwards. It's great. I love your comments. And I am appreciative of those that come to the meetings and have things to tell us, good and bad, that we signed up for that. And we're not perfect, and we will make mistakes, and we're okay to hear those mistakes. That's all I have.
Thank you. And Ed? Okay. John?
Yes. So we already talked about one of them, which was the extra meeting in February. I think was to kind of start the form-based code, have that discussion. The other one I was going to mention is one of our technical advisors is at his conference right now, learning about the software programs that could help us fix our video issues. One of the things I'm finding is that if I don't wiggle the mouse every so often, I think that's why the internet is shutting off our video every so often. So if you see me up here wiggling the mouse around, it's because I'm trying to make sure the live feed doesn't turn off. But anyways, the new process will be the video will get mixed on the computer and then uploaded to the internet. And so even if we lost our internet feed, the camera and the computer would still be talking to each other, and everything would be mixed on the computer and then uploaded. It would also help for archiving purposes because we'd have a copy on our computer we could download to the server without having to go out to YouTube to try and download it. So anyways, the cost for that's going to be about $3,200. And one of the things that he's specifically looking at as he's evaluating these various softwares at this tech con or whatever you want to call it, is making sure it's user friendly so everybody can use it. It doesn't need a lot of specialized training on how to function. So.
And this will also enable planning commission meetings to be live as well.
And the other thing it will do is it will grab this second screen and incorporate it into the video. So someone could click on the smaller screen and it would blow up the document that's being talked about and shrink the video feed, or vice versa, so that it's capturing everything that's happening on the desktop at the same time, so that citizens can see what exactly is going on. And then this camera also has some features where we could zoom in when someone's drawing on the board like Matt did. But that does require a little more specialized training. But anyways, it's coming along. It just he hasn't helped us pick the right version of software yet, because we want to make sure we get the right one and not another one that isn't everything that we want. Any questions about that? Okay. I think that's it for me then.
Okay. Annette?
Sorry, I do have a couple things. Local Officials Day is coming up next week, and a few of you council members are helping us drive. And I'll send out an email to remind you what time to be here to take our youth council down. And then also, as you know, we went out to bid for some help on a new website, and we got a draft back from our developers of that, and the committee's going to meet and go through that. It's really nice, but we asked them to do the draft of it for us, tell us what they have, so that we could make the changes to that draft. And today I met with, I'm getting that new agenda meeting program where our agenda's done all online and everybody sends their things to me and it uploads to an agenda. Anyway, it will also have on our new website a component for our audio of our meetings. So besides our agendas and minutes paper, it will also have an audio of the meeting. So like we're doing on YouTube, so people can get into that also.
Anything else?
That's it.
Okay. I do want to express appreciation to the council and all you great citizens out there for the opportunity of serving the rest of this year. I'm grateful to work with the people in North Ogden. They're the most wonderful people in the world. Everybody out is just my friends, and I appreciate you all. I'm not trying to make an inaugural address this evening, but extend appreciation to all of you and let you know that my door is always open for questions or concerns that I might be able to help with. Thank you all for being here this evening, and thanks for the privilege of serving each of you. You're just great and wonderful people. Thank you, Council.
Move to adjourn.
Sorry, I was supposed to come out that way. I'm sorry.
I thought you were done.
Thanks for waking me up.
Give you a chance to hear from me. Councilman Severin, you asked a few questions about grants, and so I wanted to just provide some information so that the council had it and so that the citizens had it, just so that you're aware. In our department, one of our mottos is to work smarter, not harder. We're constantly being asked to do more with less. So how we approach grants is not from a standpoint of apply for a grant and then hope we get the funding from the council to do a project. We look at grants as a way to stretch the funding and resources that we already have for projects that we already have planned. So I just want to make sure you're aware that that's how our processes work. For projects like this pond, I was well aware of the project long before I applied for the grant for it. But we looked at it and we said, I know there are grant opportunities available here, and I think there may be a match. And I think that may be a way to help the city stretch their dollars. So if a recreation component is included, as we wrote the grant for it, sorry, I've got such a dry throat tonight, we would be able to help the city stretch funding, and that's how we apply for a lot of things. There aren't a lot of grants out there available for projects like restrooms. We've tried, and we have received a grant. The Orton Park, the restroom there was built with a grant from RAMP, but as people caught on to that, RAMP has come back and said we don't want to build restrooms. So our next application for our next restroom for a grant project was denied. And in their training, they said we don't want to do grants for restrooms. So I hope that you see that our department is applying for grants for projects that are already on the docket, that have been discussed with the council. But as the budget's approved on a yearly basis, that's maybe why it's looking like we apply for grants and then we come to you for funding. We do come to look for the allocation of funding, but the grants are applied for on this project is already in the docket basis, and we hope to stretch it and be able to do as much as we can with as little resources as possible with what we have. So I just wanted to bring that up to you for grants and make sure that you saw how our department approached it. Two, I've heard quite a bit about McGriff Park and about the drinking fountain that's there. So I just wanted to address that issue so that you know the problem with the current drinking fountain is a break in one of the water lines that's 3 or 4 feet underneath the ground. It took us a while to figure it out, number one. And then two, when we have projects, sometimes we look at them and we're able to repair them and to do that in a cost-efficient manner. And sometimes it's best to abandon that project. And in this case, that's what our park supervisor has decided is best that we do. So we're actually looking to abandon the drinking fountain that is existing and not functioning in lieu of a second drinking fountain that will be installed on the building so that we don't have the problem with the break that's so deep in the ground with the freezing and the issues that we have. We do have that drinking fountain. It's sitting in our shops. It's not a funding issue. It's a manpower issue. So we have it. It will be installed, and we're hoping to get that installed early spring. But I wanted to make sure that you knew, our staff was aware of that, but I wanted to make sure that you knew and to provide that for any citizens who had questions about that drinking fountain. So it is in our shop. It is now ADA accessible off the building. So we think it's a good improvement for less of a cost than it would have been to repair the existing drinking fountain that's not working. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention, as we go through discussions of what parks ought to look like in the future as we plan for parks, I'd like to recommend to you and discourage putting fields in detention basins. We have them. We have them in a lot of places. Wadman Park is a huge detention basin, has soccer fields. So is Orton Park. So is McGriff Park. But they are one of the biggest problems for our department because a detention basin is built and it's structured to hold water. And it does a really good job of that at really bad times. Really good for the city for holding stormwater, but really bad for us because people want to play in our parks. They want to utilize our fields. And sometimes they'll do that when they're not dry, when they're wet. And we get a lot of problems and incur a lot of costs, repair and maintenance wise, when we have to resod and reseed and re-aerate. And we saw a really good example of that just this past 2 years ago when Orton Park flooded and we had to hold that water for a long time. And the grass loved it and it grew and it grew and it grew under the water. And then it drained and the grass fell over on itself and it died. And it killed it all, the entire bottom of that park. So from our department's perspective, it's not ideal. And in fact, it's not even desirable to have fields of any kind of sports field in a detention basin for that reason. The detention basin is built to hold water. We build fields in parks to drain water. So they become more of a repair and maintenance issue to us. We would much rather see just a playground and some grass because when you put a field in, it's not beneficial to us in any way to have potential and purpose of water storage on top of it. So just a couple comments, and I appreciate hearing things and being able to address them. So thank you.
Well, Tiffany, you did a great job. Thanks. And I learned a lot tonight. So
thank you so much. Evan, do you have any comments? Okay. Dave? Jamie? I left anybody out? Thank you, staff, for being here this evening. Have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn tonight, Mayor.
Okay, it's been moved that we adjourn. Second? Second. It's seconded by Councilman Swanson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Councilman.